In a world that's always racing forward, sometimes we need to slow down and reconnect.
Connect genuinely, broaden your perspective, and share your passion.
Bona fide dialogues, where authenticity, creativity, and passion merge.
Welcome to Bona Fide Dialogues.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Woody Weingarten, author of 4 books, has long played with words. Professionally, he used big, small, and hyphenated ones ever since jumpstarting his journalism career in New York City 66 years ago. As a wage slave, he was editor, reporter, and columnist for daily and weekly publications in California, New York, Pennsylvania, Florida, and New Jersey. He won writing awards for public service and investigative pieces, features, columns, editorials, and news. Today, he's a blogger, reviewer, critic, and publisher, despite allegedly being retired. His books are available from Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and other spots through his website, 𝒞𝑜𝓃𝓃𝓃𝓄𝑒𝐷𝑒𝑉𝑒𝑛GARTEN.com. Woody's latest volume, Mystery Dates, How to Keep the Sizzle in Your Relationship, is a how-to relationship and travel guidebook containing hundreds of ideas on what to do, how to do it, and where to go. 𝒷𝓇𝓃𝓃𝓃𝓄𝑒 and his fairy-zoner playmates is a whimsical children's fantasy co-written with his 8-year-old granddaughter. The Roving One compiles 70 columns written for weekly papers, and 𝓎𝓊𝓇, How a Man Can Survive His Partner's Breast Cancer, is a memoir chronicle and guide to research and where to get help. In collaboration with his late wife, he completed a mostly light-hearted musical review, Touching Up the Grey, that features 24 original songs. Woody has also published weekly and monthly newspapers, and for 5 years penned a national column for Audio magazine. A graduate of Colgate University, he owned a public relations ad agency, managed an advertising publication, served as media liaison for a psychiatric hospital, directed a congressional primary campaign, and worked as a legislative aide. Father of 2, grandfather of 3, he has lived in San Anselmo, California for 37 years. He figures he'll stay a while longer. Meanwhile, he can be befriended or followed on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, LinkedIn, or on his blog at vitalitypress.com.
It's so nice to see you after so many years. We met many years ago at one of the BONA meetings. BONA, it's Bay Area Independent Publisher Association. So I'm very happy that we had an opportunity to meet many years ago and reconnect now.
Yeah, I've lost track of how many years I've been a member.
I wanted to ask you about your childhood.
I grew up in the suburbs of New York, in Westchester County, on the wrong side of the tracks in 𝓈𝓚. My family wasn't on poverty level, but they were close. And it was weird because the county that I lived in was very upscale, but the place that I lived in, the area, was not. I didn't come out to the Bay Area until about 40 years ago. And I came across the country alone with a Siamese cat in a car and a U-Haul with very little in it, and very little money in my pocket. I think I had $1,500, and I was just starting over. I had been not recently before that, but not that far before that, been divorced from the mother of my children, who I was married to for 17 years, and it was time to do a new life. So I came out here, and after a while, I came out alone, but to live with a friend who was a novelist and another friend who was a cartoonist, and we were supposed to work on projects together, creative projects. And that happened but we didn't stay living together. After 1 month of living in the marina in San Francisco, with 4 adults and a dog
Sounds
and a cat.
difficult.
Yes, it was a little cramped. So I moved out. I was the first one to move out. And we were still friends, but
Mhm,
it was just like
mhm.
an impossible living situation.
Just
Um,
going back to your childhood, did you always like reading books, or what? And what was your like brightest memory from your childhood?
well, first of all, I was a voracious reader. I read everything in sight.
Mm,
My father had given me books when I was an infant, and he gave me books. My father had, I think, a seventh grade education, but was the most intellectual man I'd ever known.
I see.
He was a
Wonderful.
hero for me. He had been, still is. He's long dead, but he's still my hero.
That's
And
wonderful.
periodically I talk to him, and he doesn't talk back, but it's okay. Um, and he just fed me everything. He was very interested in my um, learning as much as I could, and
Mm,
constantly. He took me. This was a suburb of in the Rochelle
York.
of New York City, and he would take me to the museums and to the art galleries, and he took me to the top of the Empire State Building, when at that time you could go up to the very top. And he took me to the Statue of Liberty, when you could go up to the crown and the torch, and I did all of that. He took me on the Staten Island ferry, and he took me to Macy's parade and put me on his shoulders.
That's
Uh,
maybe why you're so adventurous.
Probably, but it was just wonderful. It was a wonderful education. He was a wonderful man. He was a great teacher. Politically, he was very far left. So was my mother, not quite as far as he was. My mother actually ran um, for the city council in New Rochelle on the socialist ticket once, and got probably 3 or 4 votes. Uh, and But we had a good environment,
Family, yeah.
very loving environment. And
Mm.
contrary to what 95% of the people in this country, my family was not dysfunctional. So I had to
You
defend the
had
fact
good childhood,
that
loving
I
family.
had a good childhood in a functional family.
Yeah,
Um,
that's wonderful. So, and you moved in your 40s, right? You said in your 40s you moved to the Bay Area.
no, I think well, let's see, 40 years ago. Yeah, I guess it was in my 40s. Yes.
Okay, and
Um, and
started like the new page in your life. And you already were a
right.
journalist at that point, right?
I was, but that wasn't what I was going to pursue. I
Mm,
didn't know what I was going to pursue. I figured I would be editing my friend's book
mm.
and collaborating somehow with the other friend. The second friend, his name is Don, um, the cartoonist, and I created 2 lines of greeting cards. I did all of the text, and he did all of the drawings. And um, and we ended up realizing that we couldn't distribute it ourselves. The distribution in the Bay Area was a horrible thing to contemplate. So we
Mm.
sold them to a card company. Um, and then we created a book, which was there. At that time, there was a cat trend, big thing about cats. And um, we I created the text, and he created some illustrations, humorous illustrations to go with them. And that book took cat words like catastrophe or catapults or anything with the word cat in it. And I invented a story on where the word came from. And total invention, total creation, and lighthearted. And he created lighthearted drawings. And we sold it to what was then a really big company, Grosset and Dunlap, and they were going to publish it. But the week after they sent us our advance, They were bought out by a multinational company that decided they were going to publish no new books. They were only going to publish the ones that had been published before,
Unfortunately.
but they wouldn't give us back our rights. And for a year.
That's not fair.
So, well, they said at the end of the year, then, but they'll pay keep the money, but we're going to have the rights to it. So we let it go. And then at the end of the year, the cat trend was over.
Oh, no.
So the main sales pitch wasn't there available anymore. So we let it go. It's now in a drawer on my desk.
Oh, you should publish it. I feel like cat trends are
Well, the
always
problem
come
is,
and go, you know?
yeah, the problem is that my friend has disappeared off the face of the earth. I don't know if he's alive or dead. He went to Hollywood and was doing set design for horror movies for a while. And then
You
I
can't
lost
do
track.
it without him, huh?
I lost track about him, and I can't republish it
Yeah,
without
without his permission.
his signing off. So,
Yeah.
so it's in the drawer.
But
My,
that was your first experience with the book, right?
um,
Writing a book.
no,
No?
no. I wrote another humor book. This was a gag, and it was called Footnotes. And again, I invented the history of the footnote. And I had a book that had all blank pages except for footnotes. And, it was a joke. Um, and I did all kinds of weird references in there. I remember one was a reference to Fatty Arbuckle, who was a uh, silent screen star who had a scandal at a party, and he wasn't really guilty of what he was accused of, but his popularity went to hell. And anyway, but I had all these references, and again, it was a humor book. And I had my wife read it, and my wife was sort of an editor proofreader. She would tell me, "Hey, that's really good, but maybe you should change this, move it around, blah blah blah." And I waited for her opinion, and she said, "I hate this."
Oh, no.
And yeah, she
Oh,
said,
no.
this is not funny." So I said, "Okay,
That's not nice.
I'm gonna give it to another friend," and I gave it to a friend who was an author of technical books and who was an artist in her own right and a cartoonist, very talented lady. And she read it and she said, "This is the
Brilliant.
worst thing you've ever done." No,
Worse?
yeah.
Oh, no.
The humor was very cerebral. It was really,
Okay.
it was
I'm
up here.
sure there's a percentage of population that would connect to that
Maybe,
humor, and you just
but
need to find your reader.
that's also in the drawer because
Okay.
I didn't even submit that to a publisher. So those were my first tries, and then my first real book was Roller Coaster: How a Man Can Survive His Partner's Breast Cancer. My wife had contracted breast cancer. This is over 30 years ago, and I kept a journal, and I used the journal as part of this because my thought was there's nothing out there for men. I mean, the woman has got the breast cancer. In most cases, there's a very small amount of men can get breast cancer, but
Yeah, all attention usually goes to women, and it's understandable, right? But
right,
the
right.
partner,
But at the
man, he
same time,
also goes through difficult times supporting his loved one, and it is difficult. And like you said, there's nothing out there, no books, no support for
right.
men.
So
And men want to help their wives, but they don't always know how. It's such a roller coaster, right?
exactly. So that was the first book, and I published it independently. And I learned a lot at BEPA about how to do that. And the main lesson I learned at BEPA, for me personally, I don't advise this for everybody, was there's a lot of technical stuff. There's a lot of stuff, details that you have to learn. And
in order to self-publish a book, right?
yes, right, and follow through on that. And this was like, oh God, 15 years ago, I guess. It was a while ago. And I wasn't a geezer yet. I was a pre-geezer. But I felt that my time was limited, and I did not want to spend a lot of time learning stuff that I would only need for this one thing. At that time, I had no intention of writing any of the books. I just wanted that out in public because I thought it could help men who were sort of like the forgotten part of the equation. And it took a long time because I had to do a lot of research on the drugs and the medicine, the techniques that were being used. I wanted it to be, the information in it to be really up to date, which it was at the time. And I didn't know how to promote or sell it. And I called the American Cancer Society and other cancer organizations. I asked them if they'd be interested because I wasn't interested in the money, I was interested in getting it out there.
Yeah, to help people.
I'll basically give you the book, not the rights to the book, but I'll give you the book and you can promote it any way you want. Nobody wanted the book because, and I took some pot shots in the book.
But why? I don't
Because
understand.
in some cases, I took pot shots at the medical profession and pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not what the book was. It wasn't an expose, but it was like I was more than reasonable. And I talked about all the good everybody was doing. But at the same time, one example for
no sugarcoating. It is what it is, right?
right. I can give you an example. I wrote that nobody talks about the cost. The doctors never tell you the cost of anything. And then at the end, you get this ridiculous bill in hundreds of thousands of dollars that isn't real. It's only a paper figure that the medical profession will cut down, but they'll get a lot of money from Medicare or from the government. And I talked about that.
Yeah.
And so the doctors in the hospital don't like that kind of critique.
Yeah.
So anyway, but that was my first venture into self-publishing.
But I wanted to mention, I think this book is very, very important. And you created a support group for men, right?
Yeah, not quite. The support group was founded by somebody else in Marin County. And when I was being a caregiver for my wife, she said to me, "You need to get into a support group. You need support. You're giving me all this support, but you need support." She was very smart about that. And so I looked around and this looked like a good group and I joined it. And after about 2 or 3 months, the founder came to me and said, "I am moving to Nevada. So
you're going to take over.
I need somebody to take it over. Will you do that?" And I said, yes. And I've been doing that for 30-something years now.
And how was this experience for you?
Well, the group itself helped me because they taught me a lot of things. In the book, I refer to the first bout with cancer as cancer college. You have to learn everything instantly. You have to take in all this information, a lot of which you block out later or forget about. But you're learning so much about how to be, and especially how to be a caregiver. Because most men, for example, think they know what their wives want. And they don't. Nobody bothers to ask the wife, what can I do for you? How can I help you? How can I make you comfortable?
I think the men, generally speaking, men want to solve the problems. They want to save the woman, save your wife, but you can't. So it's difficult situation to be in.
They think they can fix everything,
Yeah.
and they obviously can't. I once created a focus group at what was then Marin General Hospital, has a different name now. And there were half a dozen men that came to the focus group. And not one of them said they wanted to be in a focus group. Any focus group, not just mine. They didn't want to be in any because they could take care of it. They could handle it. And one guy, all the time he was saying this, was looking at his shoes. He never looked up, made eye contact. Obviously, he was very uncomfortable with the whole situation.
Yeah.
And that, I'm afraid, is typical. In order to get into the group, there's no dues, there's no
Yeah.
entrance fee or exam or anything.
Yeah.
It's a drop-in group without a doctor or psychiatrist or psychologist facilitator.
Just connect on the human level, right?
Exactly, yes. And it is truly a support group and has been. We had one guy in there who for 2.5 years was taking care of his wife who was dying of ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, which is a horrible disease. Because at a certain point, about midway through my tenure there, somebody came in and asked, his wife had lung cancer. And the group initially only accepted people who had breast cancer. And he said he would like to join the group. He needed help. And so I said, I have to pull the group. And I did. And universally, everybody said, yes, let him in. So we expanded the group to take care of life-threatening diseases, period. And we had one guy in the group for a while who had breast cancer himself. And so the group had expanded, but it's still there. I meet every Wednesday morning, and it met this week, and we were discussing. We now are doing themes. We didn't do that initially, because now most of the guys in the group, and there are about 12 of us currently. It goes up and down, but most of the guys in the group have. The majority, I guess about 5, have had their partners die, including me. My wife died 6 months ago.
I'm very sorry.
Her third bout with breast cancer. She had 4 years before that, she had a mastectomy. When it came back after 20-something years, she was clean, and then it came back. And then after that, it metastasized. It went into her lung and then eventually into her brain, and she had seizures and died. And she died at home because that's what she wanted.
And you were always there for her.
Yes, I was. That was very, very hard, but it was. And I have not written. I've been keeping a journal again, and when she got sick, I was actually in the middle of writing 3 other books. I've written 4 all told. I was doing 3 other books all at once. And so I just stopped writing them. I could not bring myself to spend the time or have the motivation or anything. And I have a therapist that I see on Zoom weekly now, and she told me 2 things I had to do. I had to get her out of my bathrobe. I was living in my bathrobe through the pandemic, basically. And I would get dressed if I really had to go out. But I was terrified of the mask, of the COVID being out there.
Yeah.
Having to wear a mask and protection for my wife more than myself, because she was compromised with the breast cancer. And so we did very little going out. We had gone out before that. We used to go out 3-4 times a week. As the Mystery Date book talks about.
That's what I wanted to talk about, this part of your life, that you have so many wonderful memories together. And this book, I was just reading it yesterday. It's a great book. Maybe you can talk about it.
Thank you.
Mystery dates.
It's probably the most personal book beyond the roller coaster book. Roller coaster obviously was very intense. It has a lot of information in it, but it also has memoir. Mystery Date is almost probably 50% memoir and 50% travel guide. And
A
and
lot
I
of research too.
yes, oh, incredible. In fact, I did not publish that book at the beginning of the pandemic. I was ready to publish it, and then the pandemic hit,
Yeah.
and I realized that half of the things I was talking about were probably closed temporarily or permanently. And so I thought the book was dead. Then,
And I apologize. I just wanted to ask you one question before we move to this fun
sure,
book. Uh, I just wanted to ask you this. You know, after going through everything that you had to go through and writing this book, Roller Coaster, what would be one advice you would give to a man who found himself in a situation where he's a caregiver for a woman with breast cancer? It can happen to anyone. There are like 40,000 women are I think, dying from breast cancer every year in the United States.
correct. What advice would I give? Um, the truth is, I try not to give advice. And the reason for that is because breast cancer, like every other disease, is not monolithic. There are so many variations. There's so many different things that can go on. And every individual is an individual. So that there's a lot of overlap, but I couldn't tell anybody how to act or behave or what would be good. I can give them suggestions based on my experience and say, this is what I did and I found this helpful. And that's what I tend to do. So to answer the question that way, kind of to twist it a little bit and to say what I found most helpful, what I found most helpful was the support out there for me, not for her.
Yeah.
There was all kinds of support for her. She had a lot of friends. She had organizations she was in, book clubs and stuff. So that wasn't an issue. The issue was as I was going through this, and a lot of it is befuddling because it's a first time experience and nobody can share that experience. Um, I needed friends. I needed the support group. I needed organizations. I was a volunteer in a lot of organizations. So I needed a socialization as well as the ability for somebody to tell me, when you're alone with your wife, you need to do this. And the this usually is like what I referred to earlier, that instead of presuming that I knew what she wanted, to ask.
That's
Very simple.
just that.
But people don't do it usually. Um, and my wife and I talked about everything, and we thought we talked about everything. 15 years after the initial breast cancer, she told me she didn't tell me she was afraid. She didn't tell me this because she didn't want me to get more upset.
No,
And
was
so
protecting you. Yeah, was
we
worried about
protected each
you.
other to some degree. And so I would say, watch out for that. Don't presume that you know what the situation is, even if she's honest with you and then you have a wonderful relationship. It's a tricky road. Um, that would be my advice.
Yeah, just find people, surround yourself with people with support.
Right.
Ask
And
for help if you need help
and
emotionally.
do not expect also that your best friends are going to be there. Some of them are going to disappear because of cancer or some other disease is going to scare the hell out of them. People who you didn't count as friends are going to come out of the woodwork and suddenly become your best friend. That happened to my wife. A woman that she barely knew came over like almost on a daily basis for a long time. Um, my then work, I was working for a weekly newspaper in San Francisco. They started a food chain where other people in the office would cook something and freeze it and give me something that would last
Oh,
3 or 4
this is
meals.
very nice, very
I didn't have
helpful.
to. But
Practical help too, not just emotional help, right?
right, people would step up in ways that were unexpected.
That's wonderful. I'm sure you're very grateful for that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Gratitude is one of the big things in my life. I appreciate people. I tell them I appreciate them. I did that as a managing editor for papers and things, executive editor. And um, I want appreciation as well. I'm not above the fray. I'm
All right, let's talk about mystery dates then.
Okay, mystery dates is based on the idea that one of us would take the other on a date and the other wouldn't know where they were going, he or she would go. And we did this for over 30 years. And we did
Love
it,
that idea, especially for like long-term relationships, then the spark is not always there, right? So this book is helpful for the couples to kind of bring back that spark in their relationships, right?
yes, the subtitle's called How to Keep the Sizzle in Your Relationship. There is a presumption that there was one there to start with.
Yeah.
Um, but as much as possible in all my work, I put in what I presume is humor. Other people may not find it funny, but I try to keep it as light as possible because even a relationship is a very serious business. My wife and I were married 36.5 years, and we were working on it all that time. Not so it
Amazing,
would
yeah.
work, but we would pay attention to what each other's needs. And we had what I called an idyllic relationship. We were the happiest couple I knew,
Oh.
and we were individually the happiest people we knew. And it wasn't that we
Looking
made,
at the picture, you even look similar. Did people tell you that?
no, no,
No?
no, she doesn't have a beard. Uh, this is now my
Mhm.
office. That's my office behind us. And I'll explain that in a second. This is the book
Yes.
for those who are interested.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, like Sherlock Holmes.
right. All the covers of all the books except my first one were my idea. And I'll talk about branding in a second. Um, but I'm going to tell you just about all these photographs. We collected pictures, artistic things, photographs, cartoons on trips around the world, wherever we would go. And I decided we had to put them all up in one place, and I called it a wall of whimsy. And that's so
Yeah.
every time we came in the room, it brought a smile to us.
Yeah.
It was my my wife and I mentioned pieces of this in the books. Um, my wife and I um, wanted to laugh every day. That was that was our drug of
That's a
choice.
good way to keep relationship fresh and going.
Yes, yes. And we were both creative types. So we were able to do that. We were able to make each other laugh, make ourselves laugh. She loved when I belly laughed. I laughed out loud. She said I had a wonderful laugh. And she loved to make me laugh like that. Um, and every time it happened, she would say how great it made her feel. Uh,
Oh, that's
my,
wonderful.
my wife was a musician, and this is objective. I was a music critic for years, including writing for Audio
Mm.
Magazine nationally for 5 years. And my evaluation of her talent, she was a jazz pianist. My evaluation of her talent was that
Not
simply,
biased.
no, it really, I was trying to be non-biased. She was a musical genius. Her father taught her how to play the piano when she was 3. And her first song was my Funny Valentine, George Gershwin song, rather than Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Um, and she played up until a couple months before she died. Um, and in fact, she had lost her power of speech and her power of playing through the seizures that came from the the cancer in her brain. But she pulled back and learned to play the piano again, to walk again, for some time, not to this place where she had been, but in the middle of her dying, she played Begin the Beguine. That was a perfect thing, a note, not a jazz version, but perfect. And our song together was My Funny Valentine. During the pandemic, she played a mini concert for me every day, 3 songs, every
Oh,
single day. 2 songs that she would pick, or rare occasion, I would say, play this. She had a repertoire of thousands of songs in her head. She played everything by ear,
wow.
really basic,
Impressive. Yeah.
never read music. And people would come over, friends, and she'd say, "What do you want to hear?" And they'd throw out a tune. Once in all that time was she stumped. Um, and she was also stumped when somebody asked her to play Rachmaninoff second. She did not do that.
Rachmaninoff, yeah.
Um, but but she played pieces of Rhapsody in Blue and stuff like that, classical stuff, and she would integrate that in her songs sometimes. Um, and anyway,
So you started this tradition right from the beginning, or did you come up with this idea later on in your marriage?
somebody told us about something that they did not call mystery dates. They just took a surprise date, and I did it once in a blue moon. And I thought that was such a great idea. I said, Nance, let's try this. And we did, and we liked it so much. And we told all our friends about it. A lot of our friends adopted it and used it, not to the extent that we did, because we would do it. And again, it was random. It wasn't that I had to do one and she had to do one and I had to do one. It was whoever did it. I could do 4 in a row. She could do 2 in a row.
You have to say something, right? Because what if you want to go, you planned a date for hiking and she's wearing high heels, right? You have to give some idea.
Yeah, a lot of times I would pack or she would pack stuff. There were a couple of dress up dates. One was in Berkeley where it was a Gatsby event, and I didn't know where she was going. And she got to the car, we got out of the car, and she um, opened the trunk and gave me a uh, high hat and a black tie and spats and said, "You got to put these on." And we were still outside the gate. We didn't know what we were doing, or I didn't know what we were doing. And she took off her dress, and underneath she had a 1920s sparkly gown. And she took out a tiara that she had from somewhere. And we walked into this place, and you had to dress up in the Gatsby era. And but I didn't know what was going on. Sometimes that it was rare that we asked people, each other, to dress up. That was rare. Most of the time, even on what I call a theme date, where there were multiple moving parts of the one date, um, it wasn't a matter of dress up, or we could accommodate the dress up part where we were going. I did a theme date called a clown date, in which took her to a store in San Francisco on Lombard Street that was a magic store. And I bought beanies, the ones with the propellers on the top, and rubber noses. And so we put on the rubber noses, each of us, and she put on the beanie. She still didn't know what we were doing, but we did that. And then
That was a surprise.
I took her over to a place that was then called Clown Alley, and it was a hamburger joint. and we ate hamburgers, after which we made up each other with makeup I bought at the magic store. She made up my eyes and I made up her eyes and clown makeup. And she was a professional performer. So she did a really good job on me, and I looked like I had theatrical makeup on. I have never done makeup. She looked like a Picasso painting. You know, it was like, and of course we were laughing through this whole thing.
Yeah.
And then we went to a place called 𝒷𝓇𝓊𝒾𝓃𝓊𝒾𝓃𝓎 Square, where
Yeah.
there normally are performers on the street. And there was usually a clown there, but there was no clown the day we went. But because of the way we looked, people came over to us and asked us if we were going to perform, the answer was
Can
no.
I take picture of you then?
Right, right. And then we went to a show in downtown that was about clowns. So that was it was a three-part date. It was
Mhm.
it was wonderful. Sometime we would just do a date where, again, I'll talk about one I did. We went in by ferry into the city. I live in Marin, San Anselmo, and we get there, and she looked at me quizzically, like I haven't told her anything about the date yet. And I said, "The date is dinner, and you get to pick any restaurant you want to go to." And that was the date. And she picked
Yeah.
one, and we went to dinner. And that it was very
Yeah.
simple.
And what I liked about your book, that you give advice to people for their dates, and it doesn't matter how much money they have. It doesn't have to be something very expensive. You don't have to spend hundreds of dollars on some tickets to see a show. There's so many creative ways to surprise your loved one, right?
Exactly, yes.
Without spending a lot of money.
Right. The book is not aimed at uh, Donald Trump's friends. It's aimed at the average person who may have voted for Donald Trump, but who is not particularly wealthy. There's a lot of dates about discount things. There's a lot of dates about um, how you can get freebies in different places. Um, and there's a lot of dates about how you can do this anywhere. I mean, I cover things in California the most, in the Bay Area, because that's where we experience them. But I also cover places around the country, around the world. And the way I describe it is, I've done a paragraph and a half about space. If you want to go to space, if you happen to have a pocket full of $55 million, you can get to space. No. Um,
I liked there was a part, I don't know, maybe it would be good for a couple that have children and can't go anywhere, even if they want to go. Like you said, they can go camping in their backyard and look at the stars. There's so many romantic things you can do, even if
right.
you can't, you can go on some fancy vacation and you don't have money to spend for
Right.
something special and unique. There's so many ways to be romantic.
And it's also, the book talks about the fact that it's not just for couples. You can add another couple, you can add a group of 5 or 12 or whatever you want. You can add family, you can add friends. Um, we had one date in the house here where we live, and there was my wife said you have to be ready at 8 o'clock. At 8 o'clock, there was a knock on the door, and a couple of our friends came in, and um, I just greeted them, and not knowing why they were there or what we were going to do.
Mhm.
And then 2 minutes later, there was another knock on the door, and a couple more friends. Ended up, Nancy had invited about 12 friends to our house for a party,
Yeah.
and she created the whole party. And our friends came. A couple of them brought food. Um,
Mhm. But some
and
people don't like being surprised. They like to know what to expect.
then
but
they shouldn't do this. It's that simple. You shouldn't do anything that makes you uncomfortable, you shouldn't be doing. I'm a
right.
great believer that this life, whether it's the only one we have or one of 8 million, it doesn't matter. We're supposed to enjoy the life, be good to ourselves, be good to other people. That's my belief system anyway. And because my wife believes exactly the same way, we were able to do things together, and
Enjoy life, live it
we,
fully. Yeah.
we trusted each other implicitly so that we could do things. And if we were being asked to do something that seemed a little weird, to go along with it. The only time my wife objected to something was when I asked her to put on a blindfold for a date. And she didn't like that because she had claustrophobia.
Mm.
And so that it kind of freaked her out a little bit. But she did it. She trusted me. And what it was I took her to,
But you drove a lot. I read that.
oh yeah, I would, I
That
would,
part.
I would
Trying
drive
to confuse her.
drive around in different directions. So she had no idea what direction we went to. And I got to a pizza restaurant where we had met. We had an earlier life together for a couple of years when we were teenagers. And then
An
we lost,
interesting story too that you met and she was 17, right? And then
right,
your lives got
exactly,
separated. You went your own ways, and then
right,
you just bumped into each other in this pizza place, right? Many, many
exactly.
years later.
28 years later, yeah.
Amazing
And
story.
yes, we believe we were meant to be together, that it was fate.
Some angels.
Yeah. With that in the back of our mind, nothing could ever really surprise us.
And
Uh,
to add to that, you met in New York, right? And then you bumped into each other here in the Bay Area
Correct.
so
Across
many
the
years
country.
later. It's such an
Completely across the
unbelievable
country.
story.
Yes. Equally unbelievable, my wife's mother kept some souvenirs that from my college. I went to Colgate University, and she had kept the souvenirs. She kept the fraternity pin I had given to my wife, and 28 years later, handed all that stuff to me. A beach towel, all kinds of weird stuff.
Such an interesting life. You never know, right? It's so unpredictable.
Exactly.
It makes sense when you think about it. Was
Of
meant
course
to
it
be,
does.
like you said.
But
Yeah.
you have to be open to it. It's the same thing we were talking about my men's group before. The men in my group are open to criticism. They're open to suggestions. They don't believe they have to fix everything. And because of that openness, that vulnerability, they do much better as partners, not only with the disease, but in general.
Generally. Mhm.
Yeah. In this case, the idea of this book is to make people happy, have them, not my making them happy. They take a
Give them
suggestion,
ideas.
they can
Yeah.
they can change it, they can twist it, they can invert it, they can do whatever they want with it, but make themselves happy by their own parameters, by their own needs, their own desires.
And
Um,
seeing your loved one happy brings you happiness too.
I agree. Yes.
So let's get back to that date.
Oh,
No way you took
this is
her.
my mind wanders.
No, it's
Um,
good.
I,
Get back.
I,
Wandering around is good.
um, I
That
forgot
was
which.
a pizza place,
Oh,
right? Very special
yes.
place
All
for
right. So I
you.
took her to the pizza place. I had gone there earlier in the day, talked to the manager. We got the same table we always sat at, and I put real silverware there instead of plastic
Yeah.
anything. And I put silver candles there. Um, and I think it was a rose as well. I describe it in one of my books, but my memory, being what it is, um, changes things, and I embellish a little bit here and there. But the fact is that as soon as we walked in, she knew we were in a pizza place. She could smell it.
Yeah.
She didn't know where we were. And as soon as I took off the blindfold, she realized
Like,
that,
oh,
and she
that's
said
our special place,
yeah,
right?
she said she loved the day. Don't ever give me one with a blindfold again.
Blindfold, yeah, no.
And I
Don't
agreed I wouldn't
worry.
do it, but it was a lie because I did do another one.
You
Only
did it
two.
again.
I did a second one, but it was, and she said, "But you told me you'd never do it," and I said, "I know, but you will
She
like this one."
trusted you.
I said, I promise you will like this one. It's not nearly as complicated as the other." Um, and we went to Novato at the top of the county. Her daughter lives there, and our granddaughter lives there. And she took off the blindfold, and it turned out that, and at this point, our granddaughter was like an infant, and her mom needed a babysitter. So the mystery date was that we babysit, but she was so happy to be there with the baby. Uh,
Oh, of
so
course.
if she forgot about the blindfold. I never did another blindfold. But
Yeah.
again, that's individual. Not everybody's claustrophobic. Not every, and some people may really like that.
You really need to know your husband or your wife to know, right, how to arrange those
Yes,
mystery dates to
yes,
make them comfortable and
right,
happy and excited.
right.
But you definitely give so many suggestions
Yes, I
in this
try
book.
in the book to
Mhm.
balance it between the anecdotal memoir kind of thing and things, and even talk about a lot of things that we never did, things that we wanted to do, some stuff that we were afraid of. There's a chapter on adventure. Nancy and I were adventurous, but not that we go and jump out of a plane.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not like that too.
But
Adventures, but not to that
some
point.
people enjoy that kind of thing. So I
Yeah.
put stuff in for not just things I like or she liked, but things that anybody could like.
I
Yeah.
think many people get so busy. Life sometimes gets difficult, and couples focus on their children, then they have full-time jobs, and this part of relationship is kind of missing for many, many couples. So I think reading your book, it's like a reminder. We need to bring something back, right, into
Thank
our
you.
relationship.
It's nice when somebody's read it and they get it.
I
You,
know.
you got it.
I know.
Um,
I was married for 13 years. I got divorced 7 years ago. And we used to go on the date once a year for our anniversary. So that's not good. So if
no,
I ever
but
get married again, I'm going to be more intentional about dates.
yeah. Again, you sort of carve it out to your own liking and the way you choose to do that. Um,
Right. And you just mentioned your granddaughter. Is that the same granddaughter that was co-author
yes,
your next book?
yes. My granddaughter now is going to turn 18 in a couple of months.
Mm.
She and I wrote this book when she was 8. It's a children's book aimed at kids 6 to 10. It's called Grampy and his Arizona Playmates. And it's about a wizard and his um, granddaughter, who is a fairy, and her friend, who is a fairy. And it's a fantasy, it's whimsical, and
Yeah.
it's got great illustrations. Not that we did, but somebody else did, a professional.
Yeah.
And
I read this book too. It's a wonderful book. I love it.
yeah, thank you. Um, the the thing when you said that, and you said you liked the other books, the and I appreciate you doing your homework, um, but the idea of connecting all my books. Some people do series of books, and they're all cookie cutter kind of things. I don't do cookie cutter. I do what I feel like doing, and that book um, evolved out of the fact that from the time my granddaughter was 3 years old, she used to come and stay with us every other week. Her father was not in the picture, and so she would come stay with us, and I'd play with her on the floor. I'd play with her dolls, and I'd play with her
Yeah.
horses, horse figures and stuff,
Yeah.
and we'd make up stories, and I would make them up initially, and then she'd participate. I'd have her name some characters, and we had one thing that's not no book yet. I say yet because anything's possible, but I created a crocodile family, and the crocodile family had a princess crocodile that lived with them that they adopted, and and then every time we would go somewhere, and I took my granddaughter on a lot of mystery dates with and without my wife, and um, when she would go on a mystery date, she would get really excited. She's a child,
Yeah.
and she
Of
get excited.
course.
So, but I would use the family crocodile family as a basis in the story, and I tell it as I was driving. Let's say we were going to the theater, and I would talk about the crocodile family decides on the spur of the moment they're going to go to the theater in San Francisco, and then the story would evolve around that. And
Right. Driving is the best time. I spend so much time talking to my children while driving. So many important conversations happening because they can't walk away.
right,
You
right,
are
right.
there in the car. So I
But
take that opportunity to talk to them about everything.
yeah, so I turned to Hannah when she was 8, and I said, "Do you want to do a story?" I didn't say, "Do you want to write a book?" I said, "You want to do a story?" She said, "Yeah." And we went to the keyboard, and I was typing, and she said, "Can I do that?" And I said, "Yes." And she started typing one finger at a time, and worked on it. And the truth is, it ended up as a real collaboration. It wasn't Grandpa's book and she stuck in
Yeah,
3 cents. Really, half of the book is hers. In fact, she came over here not that long ago, and we were talking about the book, and she said, "I can't remember which one of us wrote that." And I said, "I can't either." And so that was wonderful because it was a true collaboration. And there was only 70 years difference between us. She was 70 years younger than I am. I was when I wrote it.
Yeah.
Still. But that was a really fun project. Um, and the last of my 4 books was called The Roving Eye, First Person Singular. And that evolved out of columns I wrote for weekly newspapers, so 6 weekly newspapers here in Marin County over a course of, I think, 12 years. I picked 70 of my favorite columns and did an anthology. And they're about my family, they're about friends, they're about people I met, they're about all sorts of things, but mostly lighthearted, but not all of them.
And interesting. And you spent many years working as a journalist, and this profession changed a lot in the lately, especially lately, because of the technology and the news became more opinionated, right? Not
Yes,
just
it's no longer news. It started out when I was a journalist working for daily newspapers on the East Coast. You had to have 3 sources, the original source and 2 sources confirming whatever you were going to print. You couldn't print anything unless there were 3. Then it
resources.
went down to 2. Then, in a very short time, it went down to 1, and now it's 0. You don't need to talk about a source. You can use the anonymous source. Uh, and when I was doing the daily journalism, you very, 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 very rarely saw an anonymous source. It was
And in some instances, it can make sense, right?
a deep throat kind of situation.
Yes, exactly. Some
But not
specific.
many, not
No.
many. And now it's gotten to be, I mean, I listen to CNN all the time, and almost every story is based on sources. Sources tell me. That,
Yeah,
that had no credibility with me. I don't believe it. And journalism has changed so radically because of the social media.
exactly.
People are using social media for news the way people started to use television after they used radio, after they used newspapers. It has all been an evolution, not in a good way, as far as I'm concerned, because of this. Everybody is now a journalist.
Citizen journalism, what do you think about it?
What do I
Citizen
think of it?
journalism, people just report what they see using social media, and it's very
Right.
different from the journalism that we used to. I think maybe there is space for both.
There is, but the trouble is that the old-fashioned journalism, which I'll call, I'm a dinosaur. Journalism's a dinosaur. Um, that kind of journalism doesn't exist anymore, probably never will again.
Don't you
Newspapers,
think we can bring it back?
I don't
It
think
would be
so.
good, right? Is it
The
possible to
only
bring
way it
it
could
back?
come back is, I think, in local newspapers and local TV stations and radio stations that could do that because nobody can compete with the local news. You
Exactly.
got that, that's your story. Um, and otherwise, everybody jumps on a news story.
And
It's
there are
basically,
many talented journalists out there. And do you think this profession will survive?
yes, but not in the way it is now. Um, what has happened is that the average journalist doesn't make enough money, like teachers,
Yeah,
to for a living, and a couple of them make $25 million a year.
yeah.
Like football players. Beyond my concept, I can't relate to that. Um, my first job in journalism was in New York City, and I made $65 a week for a 5 or 6 day week. Um, and it didn't get a lot better. And I knew that.
But
Uh,
that's what you loved, you knew.
oh, I loved
Yeah.
journalism. I was one of the blessed people because I had found the profession where it was exciting every day. It was different every day. My favorite job was a position on a daily paper in the Philadelphia area where I held a lot of positions there. I was a state editor, a city editor, I was a magazine editor. But my favorite was when I was what they called a swing editor. And it meant whenever anybody was off or on vacation, I filled their slot because I
I
could do all
see.
of it. So I filled their slot. And whereas the other stuff was exciting because every day was different, this was exciting because I didn't even know what job might have the next. Um,
That's
I
your adventurous nature here once
yeah,
again.
I think so. I think so. I've always liked to do the unusual. Some of the columns in that roving eye are things that nobody else would do. I interviewed a bunch of uh, basically janitors for a high school about their job. It's not something everybody would go after. Um, it's
Everybody
just
needs spotlight on them. Everyone.
yeah,
Everyone's job is important.
yeah. I ran.
I love that you did that.
I went on a garbage truck with the garbage men to see how that worked. Um,
Yeah,
it just was, those things are fun for me. And I also think they're educational for people. But
absolutely.
people have no recognition of, especially jobs where there's a anti-snob appeal too. It's like people look down on those jobs a lot of times.
We
And
need all jobs. Another point you just mentioned that teachers, journalists don't make much money. it shouldn't be this way.
There
Teaching
are
our children, spending time with our children, it's just such a precious time in their life. Then everything they hear, everything they see, is so important. All their experiences.
my sense is that what my father did with me and what I did with Hannah and my own kids, of course, is the way it should work because it worked. None of my kids got into drugs. None of my kids got into sexual proclivities. None of my kids went around murdering anybody. They're more or less well adjusted. That doesn't mean they don't have problems.
So what do you think was the key to that success of being a good parent and grandparent?
Very, very simply, that can get boiled down to one word: love. They knew I loved them. They knew their mother loved them. They knew their grandparents loved them. It was just a lot of love. And that's what I was.
Love and time, spending time with them.
Yeah, exactly.
Be there for them, yeah, in good and bad.
Right. Not unconditionally. I don't believe in unconditional love.
I do.
I believe that sometimes you have to do what people call hard love. If a point has to be made and they're not getting it, you may have to do something that doesn't appear to be unconditional.
Oh, discipline is important. That's a different issue. You still love your children unconditionally.
But I love them, but that doesn't mean they're going to
be
love
strict
no matter what they do. That's what I mean by condition.
Yeah, I think we're
same thing in
same concept.
Right.
What does kindness mean to you?
Interesting that you asked that because in my group about 2 weeks ago, we talked about some definitions and what we thought we wanted to bring to the world. And one of my answers was kindness, because I believe that we should be gentle and kind with each other, and we should try to get into other people's shoes or head when we make decisions. Too often we're coming from places that we don't even know where we're coming from. We'll make a decision based on some emotion, and then 2 days later or 2 years later, we may say, "Oh yeah, that's why I did that." But if kindness and gentleness are in the forefront, then it doesn't matter what the experience is, because the experience is going to be a positive one. And that it all falls under the rubric, the umbrella of love, I think.
I agree. To me, it's very close to being caring. Kindness and being caring, it's very connected. And again, I agree with you 100% that it's under umbrella of love. Oh, that's beautifully said. Thank you so much. Thank you.